Good afternoon, everybody. It is the 3rd of March, so happy springtime to everyone, and welcome to this first of 4 Lunch and Learn sessions that we run. This is the 3rd year running, actually, that we've run our March Lunch and Learn sessions. Although it is a little different this year, thanks to the Procurement Act 2023, which came into force on the 24th of February last month. So normally this first one will be about the standard selection questionnaire, but what we're looking at this morning over the next 20 minutes or so is a bit of a whistle-stop tour into the central digital platform and the supplier information system, but also the procurement-specific questionnaire. So before we get started, just a little bit of introductions, agenda and housekeeping. So if you haven't joined one of these sessions before, my name is Gillian Askew, and I'm one of 3 co-founders of Go for Growth. As you might have heard, the session is being recorded today. A copy of the slide deck that I'm using and a copy of the recording from today will be sent out to all registered attendees, hopefully by the end of business today, but if not, certainly by end of business tomorrow. Please do feel free to ask questions. We are in Zoom, so both the Q&A functionality and the chat functionality are enabled. Please do feel free to use those if you want to. So as I said, we're going to look at the central digital platform, the supplier information system, and we are going to look at the procurement specific questionnaire. So if I start with the supplier information system and the central digital platform. So the central digital platform is an expanded version of the Find a Tender service. So if you put into your search engine of choice, Find a Tender service, it's the gov.uk version that you are looking for. Now, there are 2 parts to Find a Tender service now. So the search functionality that has always been there is still there. So you don't have to be registered to the central digital platform. And the central digital platform and Find a Tender service are one and the same. So you will hear people use those terms interchangeably, but they are the same thing. You don't need to be registered to the central digital platform in order to search for opportunities. However, if you want to interact with those opportunities and bid them, for example, then you do need to be registered, and that is a mandatory registration. And the development of the Find a Tender service starts to pull in some of what would have been the standard selection questionnaire through the supplier information system, which is why I'm covering it today. So in that supplier information system, and just to let people know, you'll see here on the screen that there is a YouTube video that is a tutorial video for registration to the central digital platform and the completion of the supplier information system. So it is about a 20-minute video. That's roughly how long it takes to go through all of the supplier information. But if you want some help, you can pause it along the way and it will tell you which section is at what time. So if you just want to have a look at persons of significant control, for example, you can just go to that section. So hopefully that's helpful. But in essence, some of the information that would normally be found in the standard selection questionnaire is now being fed through in the supplier information system. So your organisation name, your registered address, your website, your trading status. So what kind of organisation are you? Private limited company, public limited company, a sole trader, third sector, etc. You'll be adding your date of registration if you are a registered business, and that will include your company registration number or charity registration number. If you're registered for value-added tax or VAT, then you will also be uploading your VAT number. And you do have the opportunity to upload any information around trade registers, licenses and authorizations, accreditations that your organisation has. So, for example, you'll see in the tutorial video, when Go for Growth registered, we have Cyber Essentials accreditation, so we've included that. We also are registered with the Information Commissioner's Office, so we uploaded our registration there, etc. It will also pick up your classification. So are you a social enterprise? Are you a community interest company, a voluntary sector company? Are you a small to medium enterprise? And as you would normally see in the standard selection questionnaire, all the definitions for what those things mean are also in the supplier information system through the central digital platform. So you can work out what you are. If you're not sure if you're a medium or a small enterprise, for example, the definition will be in there for you to look at. It does also ask you about your persons of significant control. And again, those definitions are in there. Effectively, if you are an organisation that is registered at Companies House, then in Companies House, you will see, and I go through this in the tutorial video, if you go onto your company registration, there'll be a People tab, and in that People tab, there is a Persons of Significant Control tab as well. So if you're completing the registration on behalf of a business and you're not sure if there are persons of significant control or connected persons, then you can look on Companies House, or you can go back to your organisation and ask those questions. Supplier information system will also pick up some financial and economic standing information. So, for example, it will ask you to upload 2 years of your accounts. And I think it asks you whether they're audited or unaudited. Go for Growth, for example, we publish our accounts to Companies House, but they are unaudited accounts. So we've included this last financial year and the financial year prior, so 24-23 year ending. If you're a new startup organisation and you don't yet have 2 years accounts, then there is an alternative for you to complete. So as you would normally see in a selection questionnaire, if you are too new as an organisation, or for whatever reason you can't provide the information, there is usually an alternative for you to complete. And the importance of the supplier information system as part of that selection process is the information that you put into the supplier information system in the central digital platform will, when you are bidding, that information will be pulled through to what the public sector are calling the e-sender units, which are the procurement portals. So if you are bidding in the Northwest for a local authority, that might be the Chest, which is run by Pro Contract, I believe, or if that was an NHS trust, that might be Atomis. If it's a blue light organisation, that might be Blue Light EU Supply, or Intend, for example. That might be EU Supply Your Tender if it's a local authority in Yorkshire and the Humber, etc., etc. But in the central digital platform, through the supplier information, the information that you submit should be pulled through to whatever that portal is, that e-sender unit, and be populated into your bid. So you shouldn't have to repeat that information. And that's all about reducing duplicated effort. And actually, it really ties in with the intent to have a simplified bidding process in the public sector. So you will still be working in the portals, and you will still be completing other information around subcontractors, for example, your insurances, etc., in selection. And you'll be doing that through the procurement selection questionnaire, which I'll come to shortly. But a lot of the information, or the information that you enter into the supplier information system, will be pulled through. It does also, in the supplier information, pick up on exclusions. So there are 2 types of exclusion. We normally cover it under the standard selection questionnaire anyway. But there are 2 types of exclusion. My understanding is that these haven't changed. So the exclusions, both mandatory and discretionary, are the same exclusions. So that's my understanding. But we are always getting updates, so hopefully that is the case. There are 2 types of exclusion: mandatory exclusion, and you can see on the screen what types of exclusion would fall into that mandatory exclusion ground. So money laundering, terrorism, fraud, etc., participation in a criminal organisation. Again, in the supplier information system, all the definition information that you should need is in there. But effectively what it's asking you is, have you ever fallen foul of one of these grounds for mandatory exclusion? It does the same with discretionary exclusions as well. The difference being, and the key is in the name, mandatory versus discretionary. It might be that the contracting authority on a discretionary grounds for exclusion decides not to exclude or count you as excluded. Whereas generally speaking, on a mandatory grounds for excluded, that is exactly what it means. You would be excluded from the competition. And it may be that you were then added to the supplier debarment list. These are important grounds, but more often than not, they're not applicable to most organisations. But what you're being asked to in the supplier information system is to acknowledge whether you have or you haven't you would be included in one of these grounds for exclusion, either mandatory or discretionary. Again, in that tutorial video, I go through some of the screens and what happens if you click yes versus no and the kinds of supplementary information that it asks you for. So ultimately, if you haven't, if you're not included in one of the exclusion grounds, then the process of registration might be a little bit quicker versus actually if you have and you're wanting to update information around it, then that process of registration and including that information might be slightly slower. But as always in selection, exclusions is part of it. What we have, and I'm just going to flip over, what we're here to chat about is the procurement selection questionnaire. So I'm just going to flip onto Word. So what you should be able to see is the procurement specific questionnaire on my screen. So this was launched as the regulations launched in February 2025. I have put a link to it in the front end of this slide deck, so you can have a look at this at your leisure. But this is a 32-page document which is for the public sector, which works through the procurement selection questionnaire. So if I just run down to nearer the bottom, what you can see is what you would need to complete. So as always, you've got those preliminary questions. So in the central digital platform, you'll see here, what is your central digital platform unique identifier? So you have your unique identifier. I believe that is the same as your share code, but I'm not entirely sure. We are asked for our share code down here. We have a unique identifier. As part of the registration, you're asked what type of supplier you are, and you can pick from a list or other, and then it will give you a reference number. And it will be in your account overview on Central Digital Platform. So you would be entering your identifier, and you would also be entering your share code. The share code, once you've completed all the supplier information, you hit a button and it gives you your share code automatically. But it is all linked to that supplier information system and registration of the Central Digital Platform. And as I said right at the top, you don't need to do all of that if you're just searching for opportunities. But as soon as you want to interact with one of those opportunities, you will need to be registered. And to get your share code, you will need to have completed your supplier information system as well. Okay, so it will work through all the types of information that we have got used to seeing in standard selection questionnaire with some additional elements as well. And if I just pop back to the screen. So part 2A and part 2B of the procurement specific questionnaire is around associated persons. So you are asked about your connected persons and your persons of significant control in the registration, but this is around associated persons. So are you relying on any associated persons to satisfy the conditions of participation? So those conditions of participation will be laid out for you in the tender documentation, the tender information. That could be other suppliers who might be subcontractors or consortium members, but it would not include a guarantor. I'm just going to see if there is something in the chat. Yeah, I can pop a copy of the procurement specific questionnaire as an actual document, as well as a link into the slide deck follow-up email when I send it out. So I'll happily send you the document out. That's not a problem. Part 2B of the questionnaire is about subcontractors. So at Part 2BA, it is a list of all suppliers who you intend to subcontract the performance of all or part of the contract to, either directly or in your wider supply chain. And to do that, you would need their unique identifier if they're registered on the Central Digital Platform, or otherwise a company's house number, a charity number, a VAT registration number, or equivalent. So you're going to need some information about that subcontractor. And you'll be giving a brief description of what their intended role in the performance of the contract is. So it's capturing information about who you are likely to be working with. This is only if they apply. Of course, you may not be using anyone to satisfy the conditions of participation other than your own organisation, and you may not even be subcontracting any part of the resulting contract to anybody other than your own organisation. So you may not need to fill these things out, but they are structured in a slightly different way. If we look at part 3, the conditions of participation, so there are financial capacity conditions of participation that could be added by contracting authorities as necessary. So that is looking at your ability to undertake the contract financially. So it might be that you need to have a certain credit score or something of that ilk. But all of the information of those financial capacity conditions of a participation will be clear in the documents that are with the invitation to tender, the bid, etc. You could be asked, are you relying on another supplier to act as a guarantor? So are you are you giving a parent company guarantee, for example, any bonds, etc.? Are you relying on anyone else to act as a financial guarantor for you within that opportunity? And then, as always, you'll be asked to confirm whether you already have or can commit to obtain prior to the award of the contract the levels of insurance cover indicated below. So what you're not required to have is the insurance policies in place at point of bid. What has been really clear is that the Act is trying to remove barriers to entry, especially for smaller organisations. And so there can sometimes be an additional cost depending on the insurance policy that you're required to have. And so the point is, can you commit to obtaining prior to the award of the contract, the start of the contract, that usually is the levels of insurance indicated below. You'll normally be asked for employer liability, and that is a minimum cover of 5 million, which is the compulsory employer's liability, public liability, professional indemnity insurance, product liability insurance. It won't always be all of those. But it will usually be public liability, professional indemnity, employer liability. There might be construction all risk and other insurance policies. The key to this is whatever you are asked for should be relevant and proportionate to the type of opportunity that you're bidding for. And if for any reason you don't believe it is, then you can certainly ask a question on why that's being added, or why to that level, for example, through the clarification question process that is within that particular tender process. Continuing in part 3, you'll be asked to confirm that you have in place, or you will have in place, the human and technical resources to perform the contract to ensure compliance with the UK General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and to ensure the protection of the rights of the data subjects. That's not different. It's just in a different part of the PSQ as opposed to the standard selection questionnaire, but these were sections in the standard selection questionnaire. And then you'll also be asked to provide details of up to 3 contracts to meet the conditions of participation relating to your technical capability as set out in the relevant notice or procurement documents in any combination from either public or private sectors. And that might include samples of grant-funded work. Again, that's not new. You would now in selection often be asked for details of up to 3 contracts to meet the conditions of participation. The terminology is slightly different. But as always, if you are a startup organisation, for example, you may not have 3 contracts. And bear in mind, it is up to 3 contracts. So it doesn't have to be 3. It can be 1 or 2. But if you don't have any, you can provide, and I've popped it in a grey box on the screen, at least 1 example of previous contracts that are relevant to the requirement in no more than 500 words. If you can't provide at least 1 previous contract, you can provide 500 words, an explanation for why you haven't got any of those contracts and how you meet the conditions of participation relating to technical ability, if I can get my teeth in. And that is to try and help organizations that are either diversifying, for example. So this might be, you might be an established business, but you're diversifying what work you do, or your organization may be a startup, or you might have actually done this work before, but it might not have been through a contract. It might have been through a PO or some other mechanism. So that 500 word section, again, is not new. That's always been included in the standard selection questionnaire. And then finally, there are areas around experience of subcontractor management. So where you do intend to subcontract a portion of the contract, you'll be potentially be asked to demonstrate how you've previously maintained healthy supply chains with your subcontractors. It should include the procedures that you use to ensure performance of the contract. Your organisational standards, for example, where conditions of participation have specified organisational qualifications or standard, please, you'll be asked to provide details of how those are met, or other equivalent standards that are equal or exceed what has been requested. So it might be that you're asked about 9001, but you may have an equivalent or a standard that exceeds what 9001 ISO would give, and so it's asking you about those kinds of things. And in relation to health and safety, it might ask you to describe the arrangements that you have in place to manage health and safety effectively and control any significant risks relevant to the contract, including risks from use of contractors where relevant. And it's popped in there, please use no more than 500 words in there. So let me just have a quick check on the chat. Yep, the slide deck will be shared after the call. That's not a problem. So a copy of the video, a copy of the procurement specific questionnaire, and a copy of the slide deck will come out to everybody that's registered today. And I'm just going to check if we've got anything in Q&A. It is sometimes a barrier for smaller organisations to gain contracts if their annual turnover is not high enough to meet the financial requirements of tender. What suggestions and recommendations do you have to approach this? It is a difficult one, and one of the things I said in here, oops, I've gone the wrong way, is that the financial capacity conditions of participation could well be around turnover, although I believe there is some guidance to not exclude suppliers based on their level of turnover, but please don't quote me on that. I'll do a little bit more digging around the financial capacity conditions of participation and what those changes are. What you have always got in your toolkit is the ability to ask clarification questions. So if you don't meet a financial threshold, for example, but believe that you have the capability, including the financial capability, to run the contract throughout the life of the contract without undue risk, my view would be I would submit a clarification question to ask whether it can be taken into account and whether the financial capacity conditions of participation can be amended. There are no guarantees using the clarification process, but that would be my advice. I would also, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm always minded to not try to guess at advice and guidance for fear of ever misinforming. So my other piece of advice would be you can seek some legal guidance. So if you're a member of the Federation of Small Businesses, for example, or a member of your local chambers, you will have a legal helpline available to you that's part of your membership. And I have just used my local chamber's legal helpline to ask a jurisdiction question this morning, so they can be really useful. If you believe that that financial capacity is unfair, it's exclusive, or you want to know how best to challenge it, for example, then I would always recommend speaking to or getting some legal advice if you can through those avenues or other avenues if you have them available to you. If you ever wanted to chat with me, again, I can't give you legal advice, but I could hopefully connect you with somebody that could give you the right advice to navigate those things. They are a difficult environment for sure. And the final thing, actually, I just wanted to say before I open up for more questions, I know this has been a super quick, these lunch and learns are only 30 minutes long. It's been a super quick look at what is something that's really new. And so we at Go for Growth, and me, I'm 30 years in procurement as a practitioner. I am learning every single day about the regulations, how they're being enacted, what questions I need to ask. So, it is very much evolving at the moment, I think, as we start to practice the regulations now they're in force. For us as providers, it can always feel like a very lonely place sometimes, especially if we're smaller organisations. So Go for Growth is here to help as much as we can. And if we can't answer the questions, we'll try and connect you to people that can answer those questions, as I've mentioned, in things like legal advice. But on screen, there's my contact details. There's our general email address. You can book straight into my calendar if you want to. And on our website, there's tons of resources around the Procurement Act as well. So please do feel free to have a look at those. We've got online courses. We've got all sorts of stuff going on. And we've had previous other sessions on the regulations around open frameworks, dynamic markets with YPO, that kind of thing. So if you want more detail, you'll be able to find it in our membership resources. There are over 220 individual resources on there, but we have a remote online support assistant called Rosa. So you can just type into Rosa what it is that you're looking for, and she will give you access to the materials that look the most relevant to what you're looking for. And you can also look at previous videos. And you can, if you want to, you can sign up to our newsletter. We don't spam. We typically send out a newsletter once a month with what we hope are really useful updates from the public sector to anybody who is looking to take part in public sector competitions. And that's it from me. So I will stop sharing, and we've got a couple of minutes left, so I'll just open up for any questions if there are any. So let me just have a look. Nothing in the chat at the minute, and nothing in the Q&A also at the minute. If you do have any other questions, or if you want to have a coffee and a chinwag, or you just want to have a chat about a procurement that you're thinking about, or your business growth, or whatever it might be, please do feel free to get in touch. We are here to help. That's our job. And if we don't know the answer, as I've said, we'll try and find someone that has. If there's nothing else, I know it's lunchtime. You might be ready to scoot to go and eat. So all that remains for me to say is thank you ever so much for joining me today. I hope that was a useful session. We are looking at evaluation, specification, and answering quality questions this time next week. So please feel free to join us for that if you'd like to. And I will see you very soon. Thank you ever so much, everyone. Thank you.